College football is back, and we're back on the big mountain where we bring you a fresh take on college football betting focused on the Big Ten and the Mountain West.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. I'm JY. This is my good friend Steve. We're going to bring a third episode to you right now regarding conference realignment.
Yep.
And Steve, why don't you get into it? I know we've had some changes here, and we want to bring our viewers up to speed.
Yeah, so on Friday we learned that Oregon State and Washington State and their presidents have filed an emergency injunction and request for a restraining order on the other members of the Pac12. And there's scheduled to be a hearing at 11 a.m. on Monday in Whitman County Superior Court in Washington State. And that is scheduled to happen before a scheduled Wednesday meeting of the Pac-12 Board of Trustees. So exciting, interesting information. We wanted to bring you a special episode on that. What do you got for us, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple things on that. I do want to get into the notice of withdrawals and who really is a board member right now, because that seems to be up in the air with some of this. But let's start our discussion on this temporary restraining order that they've done. You know, they're saying that there's an unauthorized meeting going to be occurring on the 13th. They're saying that the commissioner doesn't have the right to do this. They're saying that there's a conflict of interest between basically all the other Pac-10 schools except for OSU and WSU, because they're the only schools remaining now in some of this, and we're going to get into that in a little more detail. But so that's kind of what they're saying. The commissioner's breaking the bylaws. He can't do this. We need an injunction to basically stop this. I do want to quickly talk about an injunction or a restraining order. I mean, they're not easy to get. Yeah. And personally, I'm not even sure they're going to be successful in this. There has to be an extraordinary remedy. I'm going to get into some legal mumbo jumbo, and please, we're not lawyers here, but we are trying to read up on this, do our research, look at it from a little bit more of an outsider's point of view. So, you know, there's no extraordinary remedy. And there has to be irreparable harm, meaning it's got to be something that money can't fix. Like, the harm is such that, we can't pay you for your lost revenues or some sort of agreement on that, which clearly I think this is all about money. Yes, OSU and Wazoo want to keep the Pac-12 because of the economics of that name, in their minds, the economics of that name and what that means moving forward. And I'm not going to get into all of that. We could do a whole nother episode on the revenue of the Pac-12. So that's not what we're here to talk about. But clearly, this is not irreparable harm. So I think for those two reasons, I don't see them getting this TRO. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know if you agree with me or not. I don't think they're going to get one on Monday.
So I'm going to take an opposite perspective. I think this is one of those where I think that they might actually win this as a short-term thing, but have trouble winning the case long-term. And here's why. One is, and this is cited in their case, they cited the bylaws,
yes,
which states clearly in the bylaws that members who withdraw before August 1st, 2024, no longer have a right to vote. They cease to have the right to vote. Now, that gets into the question of, did they withdraw or not?
Correct.
But I could definitely see, because there's a meeting on Wednesday, I could see a judge giving this temporary restraining order saying, okay, we're going to stop everything now until we figure out the legalities of that other question of, did they actually withdraw? So I could actually see that happening, and I could see the case for the irreparable harm. You're right, everything is about money, but I think they could make that case of, because obviously Oregon State and Washington State believe that the other members are going to vote to dissolve the conference.
Oh, right. I'm sure everybody's thinking that's what's happening.
Yeah, so I think that they could make that case that irreparable harm is, once it's dissolved, it could never be, like the Humpty Dumpty argument, that you can never put it back together again. Maybe that you could give a payoff, but I think they will make that argument, and I think it might be enough for a judge to say, okay, I'm going to do a temporary restraining order until we figure out those other legalities.
But their argument is that they don't have the right to do that.
Right.
So what does a restraining order do? Even if they move forward with the meeting and they vote to dissolve, and then the case comes out that, well, no, 10 of those 12 didn't have the right to make that decision. Right. You can't dissolve. Right. That vote is it must be thrown
Nullified.
out, nullified.
Yeah.
That's really where that would go. So that's why, to me, the restraining order is unlikely. But hey, we can agree to disagree. And frankly, at this point, that's a small piece of this whole thing. So let's move on. The only thing I do want to add there is, the Pac-12 is obviously going to have a rebuttal. Like these other 10 schools are going to rebuke what Wazoo and Oregon State are going to say. I mean, certainly they're going to probably say this is speculative. They're going to say it's premature. Again, to my point, like this is ahead of that vote. Nothing has happened yet.
Right.
So again, premature. As I said, I don't think there's irreparable harm, and I'm sure they're going to make that case, the Pac-12, that what are you talking about? There's no irreparable harm here. It'll come out as however it comes out in dissolution or whatever the case may be. And I'm assuming they'd make the case that all 12 can vote on this. So again, I just, there's too much here for me to say that they're going to get this TRO. Again, we'll agree to disagree. I know we want to talk about this, the notice as well of withdrawal, because I know you and I have both done research on this, and I think it's just a matter of how you read it and or understand it, and it's not specific as to what the notice is or needs to be. And I've really tried to find information on the notice as to what exactly does that notice have to look like, and I just can't find it. And we've both read the
bylaws.
The bylaws.
It doesn't even specifically say in there.
No,
it
and
just says they must deliver notice.
Correct. And we both read the case that OSU's brought. And even in the write-up, to me, it goes back and forth on what that written notice is or isn't. Or I shouldn't say written notice. What the notice of withdrawal is or isn't. And to me, it's just it's a 50 shade of gray type of thing here. How are you feeling about that?
Well, that's what's going to be interesting in this hearing on Monday is do those other teams, because we don't know yet. A lot of this is we're kind of assuming things.
I think a lot of reporters are assuming things. It's how they're reading it, and so what they're putting out there is based on their understanding or their reading of the bylaws.
So we don't know, are those other Pac-12 teams going to are they going to argue the fact that they haven't given notice yet?
Right.
If they do, that brings up a whole bunch of legal arguments that will take time to go through.
Yes, it will.
Which is part of the reason why I think that the judge might give that restraining order until they can make those legal arguments. But so that's part of it. And then the other part with that notice is, so sometimes in contracts, like in contract law, if you start to act out part of the contract, like if I say, hey, I'll give you $500 to build this.
Yeah.
And you build it, even if we didn't sign a contract, because I offered you something and you did the work.
Sure.
It's considered that you're acting on that contract. So that's another legal argument that can be made. And what we talked about is USC and UCLA has stopped going to those board of trustee meetings.
Right.
According to the bylaws. I think maybe Colorado has too.
That's
so
what I understand. Yes.
Yeah. So then that'll be an interesting argument. If they make that argument, is to them to explain why they stopped going. They're already acting as if they did withdraw. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different legal arguments. So the key is Monday we're going to have this hearing on the restraining order, and potentially, and we'll see how that goes. So they might get it, they might not. And then Wednesday could be a super important day in the history of conferences. Mm-hmm. This is one of the oldest conferences in the country. Mm-hmm. If as expected, the other teams are going to go in there and dissolve the Pac-12 and divide the assets, like that's going to be a historic day. The Conference of Champions gone in one day by one vote.
Which is what I think is anticipated.
That is anticipated, yes.
So I want to give my opinion on this notice, notice of withdrawal. Because when you read it, the information in the case, as I said, to me, they go back and forth a little bit on what they really mean by a notice. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, if what they mean by a notice is the announcement, public announcement, that these schools are going to another conference, and they're using that as the notice of withdrawal, I don't know if that holds a lot of water. Now, I get what you're saying. You just made the point about, verbal contracts and things like that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into that legality.
Right.
But, for me, I just don't understand how an announcement that we'll use USC and UCLA as an example. When they announce that we're going to be joining the Big Ten, that is considered a notice of withdrawal to the conference that you're in.
Right.
To me, it's just making public that we're making plans to do something else. Now, the bylaws are very clear when they're allowed to withdraw, and that's is that August 1st of 24?
August 1st of 2024. If
2024.
they withdraw before then.
If they withdraw before then, it's a
Yes.
problem.
Yes,
There's an issue.
Yes.
But after that, so to me, I'm going. Clearly, they know that. I
Right.
mean, I'm sure every one of these 10 schools, especially in the beginning, looked over this from a legal standpoint and made sure that they were doing what they had to do. So that's where I'm really just hesitant to say if this lawsuit is using the announcement, the verbal announcement of these schools as their notice to withdraw. I struggle with that. I don't think it's a winning argument. I don't see how OSU and WSU and WSU will win that case. Now, again, crazy things happen. When you get lawyers talking, they can talk, circles around me. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't see how that would happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's one of those things. It's kind of a lot of this conference realignment expansion stuff. There's a lack of transparency, and and these are public schools.
Right.
Most of them are public schools, and there's a complete lack of transparency. You and I have gone back through all the reporting on this, and everything we can find, it just talks about the public announcement.
Yes,
but nothing with the Pac-12 can we find where schools actually confirmation that they gave a written notice of withdrawal.
Submitted something to the Pac-12.
Right. Now that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
It just might mean that they didn't publicly declare it. It might have been a letter sent to the league office that's in a file, and we just don't know about it. The only thing that I could find, which was really interesting, it kind of calls back to the San Diego State thing we were talking about, is San Diego State sent notice to the Mountain West that they were thinking about leaving, planning on leaving, and the Mountain West at first tried to press that as this is your official notice, and San Diego State was like, no, this isn't our official notice. We're telling you we're just thinking about leaving you. And that was kind of a legal back and forth.
Yes.
And what ended up happening was they basically settled it.
Yeah.
San Diego State wanted to stay in the Mountain West. Mountain West wanted to keep them. And so they just settled it and said, we'll forget that ever happened. Water under the bridge. But it really would have been an interesting test case if that would have gone forward.
Through. Right.
But with this, there's so much uncertainty. Some of it is reporters assuming things. We're kind of assuming things. And that's all you could do because of that lack of transparency. But between Monday and Wednesday, and this is why we decided to do this episode.
Right.
These next 3 days might be so important.
Very important.
Where we may see the end of the Pac-12 or the Pac-4 or the Pac-2, whatever it is now, gone for good.
Absolutely. And the legal battles will continue for a long while. But yeah, I think you're going to see that. And just to be clear, we probably should have said this at the beginning. We're recording this on Sunday evening. It'll drop on Monday. We won't get this posted until probably the afternoon. So maybe people are viewing this and the TRO already have a decision out there. So we apologize if this is maybe slightly late off of that, but I still think this notice of withdrawal is a really important piece. And there are people reporting that they've given the notice of withdrawal. Yeah. I don't think that reporting, again, I think it's how they're defining what that is.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I really think that's what it is, because we haven't found any concrete evidence that shows that there's a written or any sort of communication to the Pac-12 that they are withdrawing. It's just, I think it's all this announcement. It's everything that's been made public. And again, as I said, it doesn't hold water to me, but it could in a court battle.
It'll be interesting to see how that hearing goes. And so let's say they don't get that restraining order, then it'll be interesting to see what happens on Wednesday.
Absolutely.
If they do go ahead and dissolve it, if they fight it. And again, we're dealing with public schools. There's some political issues in the state of Washington and the state of Oregon, because Washington and Washington State, both public schools. Oregon and Oregon State, both public schools. How they vote. In California, you have Cal, which is a state school. How they vote on those things. There's just a myriad of legal issues. It's a big mess.
It's a mess.
But we're gonna keep you updated on this stuff and bring you our opinions, and mostly based on how we think that the Pac-12 dissolving could affect the Mountain West.
Right. For sure. Yes. And in our last video, we talked about my realistic view of where Oregon State and Washington State are going to end up. And it was either they're going to become part of the Mountain West or they're going to be independents. You know, maybe I'll put a twist on the independents and say independence as a Pac-2 for a very short term. So instead of completely getting rid of the Pac, keeping a Pac name for at least the short term. So I'm going to add that as like a 2A and a 2B, like a true independent versus a Pac-2 type of independent.
Yeah.
I've read that they've already tried to hook up with some schools and stuff for that. So I'm gonna clump that into my number 2 option here. But yeah, I think a lot's going to be happening this week. So I think we'll be doing another video here pretty quickly.
Probably next week, yeah.
All right. You got anything else, Steve?
I'll just say, so at some point, so we've been talking about doing another expansion video that's focused on the Big Ten and the ACC.
Yeah.
I do have some exciting nuggets on that.
Good.
It's not things that are going to be as time sensitive as this Washington State and Oregon State stuff. So we're gonna wait another week or so to bring that to you. But we will have, as news changes in these in this conference realignment stuff, we will bring these expansion episodes to you. And I look forward to in the next week or two bringing you some more information about the Big Ten and the ACC and where the future lies for them.
Awesome. Very good. Well, hope you enjoyed that. Again, these are our opinions. Leave some comments down below. Let us know you can agree with us. You don't agree with us. Maybe there was a third option. Maybe you have something that you found that is a written notice or something. We couldn't find it. We were looking pretty hard. So leave us some comments. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, we will see you next time on the Big Mountain.